My name is Natalie Palmer, and I do a bunch of different things under the short-term rental niche and under that umbrella. Personally, I manage 10 properties in the Big Bear, California area. And ever since becoming a host, I've kind of pivoted my hosting role into different forms of education and media in this space. So I have a podcast called No Vacancy. I'm the co-founder of Level Up Your Listing Summit, which is a 300-person annual women's short-term rental conference, and Steadily has been a great sponsor and supporter of that. My specialty is really in short-term rentals, and I know Steadily does coverage for long-term rental landlords, mid-terms, all sorts of things. That's one of the reasons I actually really like Steadily, is that their coverage is more broad. A lot of short-term rental hosts that I start working with will find that if regulation changes in their area and now they can only host for a minimum of 30 nights, if they had a short-term rental policy before, now they're kind of stuck with that insurance. And I think Steadily is a lot more adaptive to different hosting models, different length of stay windows. So that's definitely one problem I think that hosts face, is just regulation coming in and making you adapt the way that you sought out to rent out your property. Affordability is another one. I think one thing that I've noticed is a lot of hosts are so scared of like loss of rental income if something happens, or having to give refunds to guests, the replacement of damages. And I know some insurance in the industry promises to offset the cost if any of those variables happen, but sometimes I think there's a calculation of like, am I spending so much on insurance that it's like undermining, this fear of like potential loss of rental income. They always present different plans to you, and they're really good about working out what you need to make those numbers make sense. I've worked with so many people at this point who, it could literally be anything. It could be a vindictive guest. They wanted a refund, and for whatever reason they tried to claim that the listing had a bug infestation to try and get a discount. And Airbnb is ruthless. I love Airbnb, but they will just shut down the listing and say, now the burden of proof is on you, the host, to show us a pest control report proving that you don't have a bug infestation. And there's no grace period of like, oh, we'll give you a week to submit it. They'll just shut down your listing. And so that's what I see a lot from when I say like loss of rental income, is hosts just could have had a month's worth of bookings lined up and their listing is shut down, and now they're forced to fork over money to get these inspections done, and who knows how long it takes to wait. It's something that it's really hard to plan ahead for. Like, suddenly your listing is just gone. The biggest one always is guest damages and theft. It's few and far between, but it's the biggest fear that hosts have getting into the space. That's like the number one thing I hear. And I will say, in my experience, 99% of guests are really respectful and great, but it only takes one to cost you. I've heard crazy horror stories. Guests who accidentally left the sink plug drained and left water running, and it just all overflows. And if you're on a second story and it flows to the unit below, you now have your unit flooded and you're responsible for the one below. I have a friend who, her cabin is in Tahoe, and she was just telling me last month that the guest left to go hiking, left all of the windows open, and didn't turn on the bear wires, and a bear broke into the place and shredded her curtains and all her upholstery and everything. And in those cases, it's like, yeah, you could blame the guest because they left the windows open when they left, but also, if they're not familiar with the area and don't know the prevalence of bears, you feel bad charging them. So there are cases like that where I think you just want another like safety net of like, who's gonna cover this when you don't necessarily want to go after the guest, but you can't take the hit either. A friend, he had signed up for Steadily's referral program to like get a free quote through her name, and so I tried that link out, and ever since then I've been tuned in with what Steadily is doing. The website is very user friendly. Like, you literally just, what is it? Like, you drop in your phone number or your email address or the property address, and you get a quote within like minutes, and they were really good about like calling you to follow up and kind of learn more about your business and your budget and everything, and then match you with the right policy. A lot of hosts I've seen who start, like, maybe they had a homeowner's insurance policy on their property and then they start short-term renting it. You can call other insurance brokers and just ask them to add an STR policy, but it's just not very comprehensive. I think a lot of the like big name insurance brokers that you would see a commercial for, or I don't want to like name anyone, but a lot of the ones that like consumers would know, they don't understand the short-term rental industry. They don't understand that your listing can get shut down and you lose income, that guests can damage stuff, cleaners can knock things over totally on accident. I mean, anything can happen. And so I think that Steadily just really understands the industry so well. When you talk to their reps, you can tell they've thought of everything. What happens, like bed bugs, that's not something a normal insurance policy is going to cover, but Steadily is on top of it because they have to be, because you have tenants in the home. I have never had to call Steadily support, which is a good thing. I think just with the whole landlord space, they really understand it. And I don't know if the reps that they have experience hosting or being landlords themselves, but if not, they're training them very well, because every time I've called or sent somebody else to do a demo with them, I always hear like, oh yeah, they were preempting problems that I could encounter as a host that I didn't even think of. I would say what I see is the most common is that somebody already has, right, the existing homeowner's insurance policy. They start renting and they'll just call their existing homeowner policy and say, hey, can you just add on the STR clause to this? That's the most common thing I see. What's horrible actually is a lot of hosts don't even do that. And there are a lot of insurance policies out there that say our whole policy is void if we find out that you've been renting without notifying us. There are so many people who are like, I have homeowners insurance, I'm covered. Guest destroys something and now they can't even depend on just their basic homeowners policy because the whole thing, they've been paying into this with zero coverage. That's terrifying, and I've seen that happen a lot. I think that with Steadily, they're really good about like picking the right policy for you. On the flip side of what I just described, I've also seen insurance companies in this space that this is our package and this is it, and it might be a little bit too expensive for what some hosts can afford starting out. You'll get all the bells and whistles covered, but depending on your income, it might not be the right policy. I think Steadily really works with your budget to determine like what is the risk of this. Is that something you want coverage for or not? Here's a few like niche examples I'll throw out, but this kind of stuff is like so helpful for me to hear. Like take bunk beds, for example. A lot of hosts will be like, oh yeah, we have a bunk bed in this room. They set it up. They don't think anything of it. Well, a lot of insurance policies, if your railing is not high enough, they won't cover a kid rolling out of the bunk bed because you didn't do your due diligence. But if hosts don't even know to ask those questions and be like, how tall should the railing be? You might get denied coverage for something that you didn't even know to ask about. That's why I think just having an insurance that like coaches you through these things is so critical. You might think that you did your due diligence by putting a fire extinguisher in your listing, and if your fire extinguisher expired, like you're on the hook now for that, but you might not even know that fire extinguishers do expire, and it's a really good idea to recertify them once a year. Your insurance company, if they know the industry, they can tell you that. So many cities right now, when they implement regulation, you have to pivot to a midterm rental strategy or even long-term rentals. Some hosts get into this with every intention of doing short-term rentals and then find out it's too much turnover. I don't want to be messaging guests and be on call 24/7 for customer service. Let me just long-term lease it. This is a policy. I think Steadily is very good at adapting with hosts every step of the way. I think a lot of hosts I've heard from are like, well, a lot of people I've heard from think that they need both. Like, I still need to maintain my current homeowners policy and I have to add on short-term rental or landlord insurance. That's one thing I really like about Steadily is it's completely comprehensive. So you can ditch the other policy. So even though you are spending a little bit more, yes, on the extra coverage for guest damages and stuff, you can ditch the other one. Marginally, it's not that much more, and you are running a business. So there are some investments that come with that, but having that protection that you can operate your business and see through any unexpected things, I think it's so worth it.